Hi, everyone. This is Derek Harp, the founder and chairman of the Control Systems Cybersecurity Association International, or as we call it, just CSA. CSA is a 501c6 nonprofit workforce development association dedicated to helping grow, support, and sustain the professionals charged with the cybersecurity of control systems. We're specifically talking about those systems that have pumps and valves and actuators, real cyber to physical moving parts, and control nearly every aspect of our modern connected industries. Thank you for tuning into the podcast. It is my hope you find it inspirational or motivating or revealing or informative, and perhaps at times even a little entertaining. Take care and be well.
Hi, this is Derek Harp, the founder and chairman of CSA and the host of the CSA podcast show. And I've got another great guest here, a long-time contributor to the industry. Some of you will know him and some of you might not yet, but he's been doing a lot for quite a few years. We'll get into it. But I've got Ron Fabela. He's currently the field CTO at Xona. He is an industrial security champion for sure, but he's a military veteran, a technologist. He's a founder. He's a father, husband, goat herder, gamer, astronomy enthusiast, and a lover of anything space, to be honest. An all-around interesting individual and great person to have on the show. Long overdue, Ron. Welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, Ron, let's do the backstory. All superheroes, and
man.
My position is cybersecurity for a form of superhero in the modern age. They have a backstory. You had to come from somewhere. Where'd you come from?
Oh, it all started when I touched this glowing rock. No, that would be amazing, right? No, I grew up from kind of humble, poor beginnings. I was at, so fun things and things you can use to reset my password when prompted. Born in California, raised in New Jersey, so I kind of, really not sure where I came from there. But I grew up in New Jersey. Didn't really have computers as a kid, but when I went into the Air Force, I had access to a lot of things. But yeah, now I'm in Chattanooga, Tennessee. We got used to just bouncing around, military guy, you get used to moving every year and a half, 2 years. But when we got to Tennessee and Chattanooga, my wife said, hey, you better like it here because we've moved too much. So make this work. And luckily it's nice. It's a little further south. We got great internet, great climate. I got goats, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. And no, it's, I feel privileged and blessed to be in the industrial control system community. And as we'll talk, even from some of the beginnings, it was a smaller community. Now it's larger, and there's growing pains and excitement there. But yeah, no, that's where I came from. Kind of curious about computers, curious about how things worked. I think like most of us, and then it was really down to just opportunity and application.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that, as I often do. What role technology or computers played, prior to leaving, graduating high school and leaving and going on your own.
Man. I had friends that had, this is back in the Doom days, dial up, where you're sharing files, and I had a friend that was war driving at night, like dialing numbers, war dialing.
Oh yeah.
And it was always fascinating, but I was like removed from it because I didn't have my own geeky stuff to play with. So I was always adjacent.
Yeah, that's similar to me. I had friends who crossed the line dialing to bulletin board systems, often in California from the Midwest, to download pirated games. And I did have some games that came via those channels, but I didn't do the war dialing and the modem couplers. I mean, all that stuff back at 300 baud. And yep. I remember that there was unfortunately a sort of there was a dust up with the authorities, and some of my friends got rounded up. But one guy had left his he had been dialed into a California BBS for over 24 hours on someone else's time. And it's like, yeah, kind of glad
I always seem to miss when my friends got arrested for shenanigans. So maybe I'm just, I squeaked by, got lucky. So,
well, it's the magic stone you said earlier that you disclosed.
That's right.
So what's you graduated high school, and what are your options? What do you choose to do? Is there?
Well, you had mentioned the astronomy astrophysics thing, and I really wanted to go into astrophysics. Like I was all set. I was gonna. I really I wanted to go to Princeton. I lived in New Jersey, right? That was the thing. But then as I got older, maybe I was much too practical before my years. I said, you know what? I don't want to be a professor though, an and I looked at the time length and like what I would have to do. It's not like you just get out 4 years, you go work for NASA, right? That's what like 15-year-old Ron thought. But then 16-year-old Ron looked at it and went, this isn't going to work. I'm going to get out of school, 100 grand in debt, and all I have in front of me is more school. And so I kind of had a panic moment in my senior year. I went, oh crap, what am I going to do? Computers are cool. I should just go into the Air Force for computers then. And that's what I did. But yeah, high school, I was on that trajectory of, I'm going to do space stuff. And then it all fell apart, to be honest.
So you joined and went right into computers, and shortly thereafter, if I remember right, security, became part of what you do. But that is before all these amazing military programs that exist today.
Yeah, I mean, it was 1998. It was just information security. We were computer operators, right? And that could mean you're fixing printers, picking up phones, communications at that stage. But in the 2000s, it started to evolve. That's where the Air Force started to have specific cyber programs, but it was all information security at that point. And I started, I think, like everyone does, we kind of derived compliance, but I started as, compliance. So it was called DITSCAP, DIACAP. Now it's called FISMA. In the federal government. And I got to do some hackery stuff, but that's, compliance is what kept us all employed at that point, even in the Air Force. So that's where I started, 4 years at the Pentagon, and then got to go to the real Air Force, as my tech sergeant would tell me. Did a deployment, and you know what? It was just like, wow, what am I doing? All this computer stuff living in DC. So I eventually got out and just continued on.
So I think, we have a very broad spectrum of listeners, but we know some of them are younger or earlier stage decision making. That you did this again, like you said, this is 20, if I'm getting it right, 25 years ago or whatever. But it was a huge fast start. I just knowing with my own military background, the amount of responsibility, exposure, things you got, and now that's more viable than ever. There's these amazing programs in Space Force. So somebody's sort of wondering, how do I break into the industry? We get this question all the time. And maybe when you have a couple years job experience, that doesn't disqualify you from then saying, I don't like what I do. I'd like to get into the cybersecurity. This is a viable way. Go do one of these programs. You're going to get a ton of training. You'll owe 3, 4, 5, 6 years, something like that, depending on what training you accept. But you come out. I mean, what was that experience for? How much did you gain in just that that time period?
It was interesting, right? Because you're, like you said, you're thrown into the mix, right? And so for computers, like with anything, it's just, here's the mission, here's your group, go execute. And that type of experience was invaluable because not only did I learn a lot, I learned a lot of what not to do. And what I tell people, especially with the military or any large organization, whether it's military or non-military organizations, I learned how to work in and potentially manipulate a very large organizational process, which regardless if I was doing security or not, the project side, the challenges in speaking to leadership, like I learned that at an early age at 18, 18, 19 years old. So you kind of say with military guys, you have to mature quickly, and you do, right? And there's still some immature things I do. Like I still play a lot of video games, and but that part was invaluable because then I felt like I could be put into any organization and just pick up whatever it is that they were executing, right? Because I knew how to work in those large processes. And military is not for everyone, right? But find something, even if you're in college, be a part of an organization. Do IT support for your college network, go intern or volunteer at a nonprofit. When you do these things and you have to keep networks and systems running and living, all of a sudden you have a new appreciation when you come over to the security side.
Yeah. So before we move on to your post-military, any memory from that time period, anything that stands out, anything that sort of even today affects you, or you're like, yep, that was the moment, anything like that?
So my first job at Air Force Pentagon Comms Agency was compliance. You're going to laugh, though. We had rules and regulations for password complexity. And so one way to check that would be to crack the passwords. But process-wise, we had like a dozen or so agencies under us. Every month, they would send us their SAM file, like from their systems, and then we would crack them to ensure compliance. It's just wild to think about that right now. They were just sending those in email, like just here's our password, right? But that's the way it was done. This was 98, 99. But my very first hacking job, that wasn't even really that. We had to use LoftCrack, which was a standard password cracking tool at the time, but the Air Force it wasn't very modern. They didn't know how to acquire that. Like, how do you buy that in an Air Force process? So one of my first jobs was keygen cracking, loft crack, so I could use it and do my job. That experience, because I was kind of put into that situation, then that got the hacker mindset going. It's like, oh, well, not only am I password cracking, like, why am I doing this, but I'm having to hack tools in order to get my job done. And that kind of continued on through the Air Force and even as my life as like a pen tester. So that was fun. 99, I didn't know what I was doing. I'm reading stuff online and I'm having to crack a password cracker so I could use it.
So anything, this is always maybe an opportune moment, anything that you would now tell yourself if you're sitting across the table from your then self, any advice you'd give yourself?
Wow. Time management was always like focus on being structured about what you're learning, what you're reading, and then what you're trying out. Because I follow that process a lot. I read every day. I look at manuals. I listen to podcasts. I do whatever. And then you want to pick something to go and execute. I was just all over the place, just ADHD squirrel. One day I was doing this, one day I was doing that. And when you're young, especially in your career, what it feels like is you go, wow, I never really made progress on any one thing, right? I got the 20% on 100 things instead of 100% on like 3 or 4. So that's what I would tell myself, because early on, don't discount the type of exposure to systems that you have, right? Like in the military, I had access to networks and devices that I don't have access to now, right? So don't squander that opportunity.
Okay. Yeah. Good advice. I don't know how you want to break it down. You've been at a number of, interesting companies that everybody will recognize, Lockheed Martin, Booz Allen, Alert Enterprise, Lockheed again, Leidos, Dragos, and more, more to come in Xona today. So how do you characterize, that journey? And are there particular steps along that journey that you think were hugely formative to who you are today, or were more powerful than others, good, bad, or indifferent? I mean, I think, we learn from, like you said, you learn from things not to do too sometimes, but, what you jumped down and went, obviously the military to Lockheed Martin, a well-known, large industrial or, military, military industry, company. What were you doing there first?
It seemed like the natural progression, right? Get out as an enlisted guy doing a job for the military, then you go become a contractor doing the same job for the military. But what I learned through that process.
How much change?
Not really. It's weird. I mean, the joke is, you get out as an E4, E5 and you triple your salary just doing the same exact thing. But that was part of the reason why the military was important for me. Was not only did I have the experience, I had the clearance, and I had the program knowledge, so I could just fit in programs. So I started working missile defense. What I learned though throughout, and my takeaway was almost everything is a services or a customer facing interaction. At least for me, it started to become that. So whether it was actual consulting or even in the military, I had customers, I had people that I had to serve, literally serve. And so once I got into that mindset of, oh, I'm just here to serve others, it made everything a lot easier to adapt to, right? So everything I tried to approach, even if I didn't know what I was doing, was in this, hey, I'm here to help you with something. If I can't do it, then maybe I'll find someone who can, or maybe I'll learn it, or I'll investigate. But that's really what I learned, especially in the first part of my career, was 100% consulting, right? Whether it was with Lockheed or anyone else, it was serving other programs and then the people in those programs. And I think that was a huge part of my formative years, because even when I got into product companies like, Dragos and even now at Xona, I kept that going with me. And I think for our viewers and listeners in industrial, you'll feel the same way, where you are serving not a greater good. It's not really a military mission, but there is a mission that's other than ARR or uptime on emails, or, it's just something tangible. And so there's a service component of that, even if you're not in the military or not working for a utility. So that has carried through from my early, kind of career.
That theme has come up before. There are a lot of former military folks in this, in our ecosystem. But you're right. Even if you never served, you still now you are part of that mission, mission-oriented feeling, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. And that a lot of people feel that way. We're doing something important that that matters. Industrial control systems, early exposure, and where in that chain did that begin?
This one, I don't think I'll get in trouble for doing this one, but I was in Lockheed. I was doing the same compliance, DITSCAP, DICAPA for missile defense, missile warning, right? So weapon systems. Within Lockheed,
a system of some consequence.
Of course, right? Yeah, it's shooting up. wild, right? Whatever you think of the MDA program, you're shooting a missile to shoot down a missile. Like it was wild, right? So that piqued my curiosity. And to be honest, it wasn't really fulfilling to try to secure a system that was in Cheyenne Mountain. You're just like, oh, it's literally in a mountain. Like what kind of, effect am I going to have on this as an individual? So I started to look within the Lockheed community of practitioners, what they were really good with. And I saw, you may be familiar with him, Dr. Eric Cole had put out this request. He was a fellow there. He had some like really cool title at Lockheed for a time. And he said, hey, does anyone have experience with NERC-CIP in nuclear power generation? And I went, all right, let's Google, let's check out what that is. All right, NERC-CIP is compliance framework. It has controls. This is all very familiar to me. I know what nuclear power generation. Even then I was like, wait, these two things don't apply to each other. And so a little bit of social engineering. I wrote up a slide deck that said, this is how you apply NERC-CIP v3 to nuclear power generation, maybe 12 slides. I read through the controls and I had a slide at the end that was like, hey, this doesn't really apply. I sent it to Dr. Eric Cole. Now, I didn't lie. I said, hey, I've never done this professionally, but here's the research that I've done. And he said, you're hired for this program. And what the scary thing is, the other thing I've learned, whether it's Lockheed or any other organization, never assume that you're not, let me see, there's too many negatives there. It was always difficult thinking that you were the first one to have thought of something in a large organization like that with so many smart people. But apparently in this organization, I was the first person who piped up and said, I know what NERC-CIP is, and I've read it. And so that was my journey into industrial control. It was a weird NERC-CIP assessment for nuclear power gen. It was just wild. And I never looked back. After I did that, then I was like, I'm sold. This is great. This is exciting. And so within Lockheed, I sought out programs to deal on what they call their commercial cyber services.
Awesome. And so is something having to do with control systems ever since?
Yeah, ever since. I moved over, and then of course it's more consulting, it's more external consulting, but utilities, oil and gas, manufacturing, like anyone that we could get to buy our gap analysis, risk assessment, penetration testing, we went after. And interesting, it was unusual for Lockheed to have a commercial services arm. So we were always the black sheep, or just kind of the odd man out, even within Lockheed.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's funny you should mention Dr. Eric Cole. He's episode number 5. Where you are looking like you might be episode 105. And so he is episode number 5 of this series. Back during COVID, I'm like, what, maybe I should just start calling up some people I know and chatting with them. Yeah. So that's where this all started. So it's such a small world.
Yep.
Okay, so let's, Lockheed. You left Lockheed. You came back to Lockheed. You did a couple stops along the way. What was that? What was that about?
Consulting is difficult, especially if you're a pen tester or you're an assessor, because you feel like you're telling people the same thing over and over. So, hey, I run a Nessus report, I'm doing a pen test, whatever the case may be, and you're saying, hey, patch your systems, look at your firewalls, change your passwords, and it becomes monotonous. And so I dipped my toe into the product side with Alert Enterprise, and I learned a lot. And then I think I was a little young, maybe a little naive into like how the product side of the house worked as opposed to services, and I kind of ran back to services. I was like, no, there's still more to give out there, and that's where I earned a lot of my hard hats, was in that second round with Lockheed, just going all over the place for process control networks. Whenever someone asks or discusses active scanning in industrial and they throw their hands up, I'm like, no, I was the guy doing it. And because I was the guy doing it, I know why I encourage or discourage, like, never do this. It's not that it's dangerous, it's that it's just soul crushing, because in order to do it safely, it's so slow and so monotonous. And but no, I went back and and I think for a lot of the consultants, especially the road warriors out there, you kind of go in these cycles of like 18 months, 24 months where you're just burning on the run, and then you're like, oh, I need a break. Right. Yeah. And
so I think, because you brought it up, I want to go back to that topic just for a minute. This concept of active interrogation of endpoints and scanning, in the technology environment. You were right there on the vanguard of where it started to happen and where it caused issues, right? And today we've inherited a mix. Now there's vendors saying, hey, we can turn that off in our product, or our product can do it here. It's safe to do, but I mean, they're creeping towards either we're passive or we're passive, but we're capable of being being active. What's your vision on that? Are we going to see more active allowed? Is it because it's engineered properly, or it's set up properly, or the systems and networks that it's being done on are more modern and more resilient and can handle it? But when I got first exposed to it, Mike Asante recruited me to take a look, at doing a company together in this space, 2010. It was a huge no-no still. Absolutely nothing active.
And that's about the time that we were out there doing active, but it was manual. I think everything you said plays into it, right? There's the advancement in network stacks and networking in general. The network modernization has been huge. So we're not encountering those war stories of this is an unmanaged dumb hub from Best Buy and we blasted the network. I think TCP stacks on devices are getting more modern, so they're able to handle the asynchronous, kind of scanning and this and that. I think awareness is better, but the overall thing, the reason why everyone's so iffy on it is the idea that it's automated or that it's broad. And so when we were doing scanning, it was, and I described to people, if they're not on the operations side, the concept of three-part communication, which you probably know and understand. But if I said, hey, Derek, I'm going to scan this device on IP 10.10.1.1, then you would tell me, okay, Ron, you can scan 10.10.1.1. And then I would on the third part say, okay, Derek, I am now. Just hearing me say that for one system right now, you're already bored, right?
Well, that is the tedious. That's what you were referencing earlier.
And we did that for hundreds of systems across, tens or dozens of facilities and sites. Because that was
the exact opposite of we're flipping a switch and all this stuff's going to happen and all these endpoints. That you just described the tedious nature of how it was done in a very methodical, manual way.
And it was the only way you could convince or prove to the operator that not only did you care about the safety and reliability of their system, but that you were going to go through this process to ensure that instead of just throwing a /24 into Nmap or Nessus and letting it go, right? And I think that's the person and operator in the loop, the ability for them at any point to say stop work. We always had stop work authority, right, from a safety perspective, but we carried that into our cybersecurity and our scanning, our assessments, where at any point we could say stop, and it's not like we had just blasted 100 different devices. And so I think if we carry that forward to this debate on active versus passive, that's the part everyone gets scared of. Can I misconfigure a scanner and now it's going to blast the entire /8, every single device that it has routes to? Or is there more a methodical or intentional process? And I think yes. I mean, and we can't take for granted what industrial OEMs have been doing for decades anyway. They have systems that poll and bring status back. So it's just doing that in a way that proves that we consider the safety and reliability of the system, which is why, again, as a person, human on a laptop, that was just excruciating, but that was the only safe way to do it. And, in the 2010s, because you did encounter those systems where one bad Nmap scan and now the process is down, and that was unacceptable.
Yeah. So you're one of the people that created the antibodies that form as soon as
or were the people that because consultants in the late 2000s, early 2010s, that's where you hear those stories is, we had some guy from Lockheed come in and he ran Nmap and our process shut down, right? So we're both to blame, but but on the team I was on, the team I ran, that in every rules of engagement, that's what we started with is zero impact to operations. So everything we do. And just having that as your first mantra was huge, and what I found out later was unique in the industry. You had others, like Lofty Perch and some of these other guys, like some of the known, like the InGuardian guides, where they had that exposure. But if you just got off the shelf people from IT, that's where the war stories came from, right? Yeah,
that makes sense. So let's talk about the most important company in entity activity in your whole biography. That's this Binary Brewworks. I mean, what's going on there?
Oh man, I almost feel bad. So wow, how did I start? This is maybe a long story. I'll try to break it up. So my wife loves me very much, and she said, Ron, you need a hobby that's not based in computers, right? You work, then you game, and then you work again. Like you need something else. And so I think it was around
computers and some sort of industrial equipment. It's still going to come to play in this story.
It does, because we over-engineered it. It was great. But no, so she got me one of those, like, learn how to brew at the local place, and it was, it was cute, and you had your bucket of beer, and then I went to brewing on the stovetop, and then it just kept growing and growing. And then what I realized when I moved to Tennessee, myself and Stephen Hilt were brewing a lot, and we'd go to the same conferences. We'd go to S4, and everyone loves the guy who brings free beer, right? So, fun fact, the first craft beer bash that Dale did was on his penthouse. He did like a party before the conference for the speakers, and Steven and I served beer as Binary Brewworks at that party. So we inspired the current craft beer bash. But Dale did an important thing. He said, Ron, I would love to pay you for this. And I said, well, I'm not licensed. I'm not, like, you technically can't. Right. And because I'm such a process or compliance oriented, I looked into what it would take. And honestly, it wasn't a lot. You had to have a place to brew at, but basically that was it. So I went and got registered. Like, I was a real, like, commercial brewery there for a hot minute, and distributed for like a few months, and then realized, oh my God, I'm never going to be able to do both, industrial consulting and this. Yeah. So it just became a garage hobby thing. Right. So.
Still going? Still do it today?
The garage needs to be cleaned out, but yeah, that's it. I go in fits and spurts, right? The last big focus was bringing the brewery up to Drago's headquarters, right, and building that out. And Tom Van Norman at the time was there, and he did all of the control systems and the over-engineering part of it, and I did the brewing and the knowledge transfer, and that's how they have their brewery up there. So, but really, ever since then, it's been tough to keep it in the garage, because the weird thing is I don't drink a lot of beer. So
you're making a product that you don't end up consuming that much of. Yeah.
Now, what I liked about that, and what you're finding, is that I'm not hyperactive, but I bounce around and everything. Brewing beer, like baking bread or some of these other processes, you can't rush it. And so for me, it was almost like meditative, right? You have to boil it for an hour. You can't, make it, boil it in 30 minutes. So I enjoyed the process of, and the interaction of the brewing process, even if I don't drink a lot of beer.
Yeah, that's awesome. I have, a couple of passions, and the one people probably identify the most with me is scuba diving. I teach scuba diving, and they're like, how do you have time to do that? I'm like, how do I not have time to do it? It's totally different than what I do. I got to do it. I've got to have this other thing that's more physical. It's, working with people, and it's so different than what I normally do, and I need it. So it sort of conjured up in my head as I heard you talk. I think there's real value in that. I mean, that's something, I think, not to belabor the point, but I think for some listeners who might be in a tunnel doing a thing, all consuming, there's great value. I found that the rest of my life, my professional life, my family life, has benefited by having some people call it a hobby. I think it's more than that. It's like a passion, a side passion. Everything benefits from that. It's not a waste of time or a deviation from, like, just go all in on the one thing. It's for human beings, that's maybe not the right, for most of us, not the right thing to do, to be 100% with one thing.
Right. You burn out, and we called it my zombie apocalypse skill, right? Like, I feel like as a person, I have something to add, when you can't hack systems or provide consulting on cyber or whatever, like, well, I can turn grain and water into alcohol and trade it for stuff. Like, so that was always the joke, right? But even with scuba diving, you've probably seen too, like, that's a process. It's intentional. You can't rush certain things. You have to be mindful and in the moment of your environment, and it just really is meditative, no matter what it is, right?
Absolutely, everything you just said. Yep, for sure. All right, so talk a little bit about sort of today. You're doing multiple things. I know I know in the context of Xona, you're doing a lot there, but you've got your fingers touching some other stuff as well.
I try to, Patrick Miller at Ampere, I've kept in contact, and it's funny how he's collected a lot of folks who are just keeping at arm's length to helping him out in any way possible, which is a testament to his, reputation in the community. But no, my focus is at Xona. Here I am in another ICS security startup, but this one's different. What was exciting for me is that in detection, which I love detection, and I'm really passionate about visibility and everything else, but I always felt like that we were just revealing more problems for folks to go solve. Which is a vital thing. At Xona, the reason why I like this is I feel like we're just solving one problem. So I feel like, again, back to that, I'm here to help people. I actually feel like I'm helping people. Same challenges, right? You have to sell product, you have to prove value. The industry's weird right now with that, but it's nice to still be in the industrial space and not feel like I'm having to chase every latest, oh, here's what happened in Ukraine and here's our take on it, right? Like, it's just no. We're here to provide this. It's secure access, right? But it's just like we have a thing that does a thing, and here you go. How can we help you operationally? Now, the field CTO I'm finding is a useful catch-all phrase for, well, we're just going to have anything that we need you to do, Ron, you're going to go do, which I actually really enjoy. And what I enjoy about that is I get to still interact and work with the community members, right? I'm not just in a vacuum.
Title at more than multiple companies. Does it mean different? Is it malleable enough that it means different things, or are there something sort of common to that? Because I think that's something you could shed a little light on, that idea of field CTO. I've seen it in other places, and if I'm not fully cognizant of all that field CTOs may do, that might be something you could shed a little light on.
I think the field designator is really, hey, you're still an individual contributor at a strategic level, and you're customer facing or outward facing. In CTO roles I've had in the past, or other CTOs, they're more inward, right? Yeah. They're looking at the community, the industry for trends, and of course how to serve the customer and the market's needs, but their real customer is inward, right? And so for field, at least my understanding, and I had to Google it too to see what the community or the industry thinks a field CTO is. But for me, it's about keeping a pulse and serving the community and having to still handle the business unit type things in a company, sales, marketing, support, product development, all those things. But you're doing it with a lens of, this is what I'm advocating for on behalf of the community, or your customers, right?
Yeah. Are you on the road a lot?
Yeah, which I really enjoy. October and November is killer for conferences. So you know that. I mean, you.
I saw you in a couple of different places.
Yeah, but in my role, I still am able to interact with customers at their facilities, both pre-sales, customer support, implementation, and so I am on the road quite a bit. It's been in balance with conferences, but now I'm about to go back on the road to go serve the community, right? Which is what I really love. And so that's a nice give and take, right? Because you're not just seeing the same Marriott in the same conference room every time. I get to go out and pretend like I'm an engineer and go out to power plants and oil refineries and stuff, and see the business end of our industry.
Oh gosh, so I feel like we're nearing our time, and I've got threads I want to pull. So quickly, one of them is, you mentioned Patrick Miller, another fellow, and thank you for becoming one of our recent CSA fellows. He's episode number 35 in the podcast series. So it's like you guys all touch, draw lines to each other. So it's like, hey, you can go pick up that person's story too. So you talk about you going out and all the sort of the travel and seeing different things. You've been in all these different companies. Give a grade. Where are we? You got as long. There's few of you that can say control systems, cybersecurity for a couple of decades. That's a pretty small group, and you all know each other really, really well. I've been sort of part of this ecosystem now for 13 years, and I feel like an interloper. You guys, they go back 20 years. It's just not that many of you. Have we arrived? Like, yeah, control systems are finally safe and secure, or is it an F? Oh my God, no. I mean, where are we?
Well, back to what you said about the interloper, I have found the most genuine folks like yourself or Patrick or anyone else is they continue to feel like they're the interlopers. Like, we continue to reference the shoulders of giants that we stood on. Like you mentioned Mike Asante, you mentioned all these folks where you go, yeah, there was a vanguard before us. And I think that's where we're at now. We're at that level of maturity to where we're like the second or third cycle in, right? Before it was fighting for a seat at the table. And now, and then maybe even a decade ago, now we had a seat at the table, but we didn't really know what to do or how to influence or how to speak to government, whatever. Now government is, maybe to our chagrin, telling us, hey, we've heard you. You've been at the big boy table for a long time now. Here's legislation to go do that thing. And we're going, whoa, no, wait. So we've evolved, and where we're at, I mean, I don't think it may be good for the industry from a job security side. I don't think we'll ever be 100% secure. Right. It's almost like, my dad was a garbage man. There's always going to be garbage, right? There's always going to be. But I think we're second or third cycle in, almost second, third generation in of a community to where now we can mentor them and they're not starting from zero or even negative, right? And so now it's about using the opportunity we have to affect real change, right? So if something happens in Ukraine, or I can't, I'll say Stuxnet now, everyone has to drink at home. But we had these milestone events. People mentioned Stuxnet, but then there was a group of us that always mentioned Aurora, right?
Yeah.
And then before that, there was always a group. So you just keep going back. Now we have these events, and we need to be able to use them not to convince people that we should be heard, but to convince people that they should take action in a way that is meaningful. I think that's where I'm seeing the shift. There's a lot more community interest. And the good news is that if you're starting out now, you're not starting from scratch. There's a wealth of knowledge. And the one thing I love about our industry, and you're doing this service as well, is that the knowledge base and the access to people who have done it before. I mean, we didn't have that 15, 20 years ago. We were all just kind of floundering around, 40 guys at S4 in a conference room going, oh, this is cool, right? So that's where I see the industry now, is we're in that transformative phase to where we can actually go do good for our industry and actually serve them, because we have the tools, the resources, the awareness. So now let's not squander it, right? That's been my big thing. Let's not mess it up.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned S4 and Dale. Episode 34 and 65 are with Dale.
Oh man, and you have these folks like Dale and others where they were doing it before it was cool, and now people just gravitate towards them, and again, he's really using it as a community service. Of course, we all have to pay the bills, etc. But man, S4 has been that thing that has anchored us.
Yeah, and I didn't know fully how it had evolved till in that episode that the 34th episode of this series, he told the story of how S4 came to be, and it was early on, and there weren't that many people that can go back as far as like there's just 40 of us in a room, but that's where that thing that sort of thing begins, right? Where any sort of thing begins, oftentimes with a nucleus, and then if it's lucky, it grows from there, and in his case, and in S4's case, it did. But not a lot of people go back to the 40 people in a room stage. That's definitely predates me.
Well, and you probably appreciate this too, but sticking with it. The early days of what you've done here were probably rough. You're just like, oh, you friends and family. Not a lot of people join the streams, or not many people, but you stick with it, right? And all of a sudden, it becomes this momentum that. Dale could have very easily gave up, right? And where would we be as an industry? You could have given up. Where would we be as an industry? And so I think that's a good takeaway for everyone, is when you feel, and that's a difference, you should never feel alone in our industry now, right?
Yeah.
And so to stick with what you have, it's going to take time. We're a little slow in industrial, but in 3, 5, 10 years, it's going to have this amazing impact. So just stick with it and don't fail alone. Find others to come with you on your journey.
Well, I think that's great advice, and maybe that's the we go out in style here. That's expert advice.
Love it.
Stick with it, whatever that is, right? It could be doing something that everybody benefits from, or it could be right down to your own where you want to be in 5 years. Then start building towards it and stick with it. But there's a lot to be said that, and a lot of people do. I mean, you can look at just even outside our industry, human nature. They do give up sort of right before the results that maybe they were hoping for or wanted to see. And you're right, CSA was a handful of meetings 8 years ago. They were fun, but they were ad hoc. They were here or there. They had no idea what this was going to turn into. And they were just passing 32,000 people to join the community, and 2,000 more people are joining every quarter right now. So that's great advice, and I think applicable to just about everybody in everything we might do as a human and endeavor to accomplish something.
Yeah.
So, anything you're excited about in the future? Anything, a lot of people, drop a lot of different technology and buzzwords and terms what are you excited about if you're looking ahead? And that's something I think also we get asked by people earlier, like, should I specialize in a certain area? A little bit of a different question, but the reason I was combining those is people sometimes think if I could just see ahead and become really good at X, then later, 5 years later, I look like a genius, So what are you excited about?
Right. I'm excited about, we're seeing a lot of application of existing or advanced technology in the IT side, but then expertly applied to industrial problems, right? So the easiest one is we're seeing cloud, right? We're seeing virtualization. Siemens just put out their virtual PLC. We're seeing these inroads to where the community's going, wait, if we take a step back and look at what we're trying to accomplish, a lot of these are solved problems, but you can't just copy and paste from IT or SaaS or enterprise, whatever, over to OT, but the willingness is there to do it, right? And either it's market drivers, we have less people, we have to do more just in time, whether it's security, right? AI is a crazy buzzword right now, generative AI. The community is willing to at least experiment. Where before, and you probably echo this, is they were so rigid. It's like, no, we ran the plant 30 years this way. Why would we ever change?
Yeah.
That was so difficult to fight against. So that's what I'm excited about is now we can be creative as long as we're, again, mission or service oriented, right? As long as it's to serve the operational mission and to make it more efficient, more safe, or whatever, but we can be creative now. Hey, have you thought about this new technology? Microservices, like you were talking about, like, what should they look into, like Kubernetes, Docker, all these crazy things that you hear about. At one of the S4 events, I think it was Duke Energy, where they're like, yeah, we're doing a lot of microservices and grids and grid deployments. And so that's the thing that excites me, is any new buzzword you hear, like generative AI now, you feel like there's an opportunity to apply it to the industrial problem. Where before, just like you said, it would have been a non-starter. No, you can't do scanning, right?
Well,
Or you
I
can't.
love that. I love that's where we ended up, because that's a very optimistic note, and answers my question directly and some things people could look into. But it's also an optimistic note that we can affect more change when that's true, when there's more openness. And it's not a free for all. You had all the right cautions in there, which is like, hey, let's just go do whatever. No, but if the mentality is more open to like, okay, well, how can we go about doing this? That is different than, don't touch that box. Joe made it and it works. Joe doesn't work here anymore. He retired, by the way, but don't touch it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Ron, this is sort of my favorite part of the show. And I think you know what's coming, because I know you've done your homework and know what's coming. The Pivot questionnaire. So I'm borrowing it from the Inside the Actors Studio television show that ran for many, many years, or was hosted for many, many years. It may still be running, but the longtime host, James Lipton, has passed. Mm-hmm. But he always ended his show with all the famous actors and actresses with the same 10 questions that he borrowed from a French show before that, hence the Pivot questionnaire. I don't know what that show is about, but I think this thing's been in play for many decades. If you're up for it, I'll ask you the exact same 10 questions.
Absolutely, I'm ready.
Okay, what is your favorite word?
All right, so I'm a nerd. It's tachyon. Tachyon is a hypothetical particle that travels faster than the speed of light. And just how wild that concept is, and people say it's impossible, and I love that concept.
What is your least favorite word?
Oh, I've been hearing it a lot, but it's like a desperation, like this concept that you're in a spot where you're helpless and you're just desperate to attain something. And for me and for my loved ones in the community, you never want to hear that word.
What turns you on, either creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
The idea of we didn't talk about it a little bit, but I was a foster parent as well. But it's the long-term growth of something that's not yourself. So it's that tension between I'm investing in something and I know that I'm not going to see the results of this. And although that could be frustrating, I'm starting to see that is where I get my most fulfillment out of, is knowing that I'm doing something like that. And so, yeah, that idea. And for me, it's my children and being a foster parent, et cetera. But I think it's important that we all find something like that.
What turns you off?
I was thinking about this too. It's the idea that you can't do something because of resources or access. I like I said, I grew up kind of as a poor kid, and I think that idea of, if you're creative or if you want to accomplish something, there shouldn't be barriers in the way, like access to resources or money or knowledge. Like, you should just be able to go do that. So that really like gives me the heebie-jeebies, especially in our community. They say, well, no, you can't do that. It's like, well, no, why? Like, so that really, yeah, that's a turnoff.
What is your favorite curse word?
Oh man, asshole. Asshole's a good one. It's so universal. You can be an asshole. You can act like I don't know. It's so visceral. Like, what I'm saying, and it's great. Love it.
What sound or noise do you love?
Like a quiet night, kind of cold, and just the sound of cold silence. Like, because I like stars and astronomy. You go out like on a winter night, and if you're away from the hustle and bustle of a city, silence in that context has a sound, and it's amazing. And I encourage everyone to go try to find that at some point.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Right now, my dogs will not stop barking. I don't know what it is. Because we live on a farm and they just bark, bark, bark. So I'm trying to figure out what weird internal thing that's striking me. Like, is it like we're in danger or like? But man, that one's really on my nerves for some reason right now.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Well, I feel like the astrophysics thing is a throwaway. Because I was a foster parent, the therapy or the mentorship side for folks that have experienced trauma. Now, you would say that that's like a psychology or a therapist route. I found that to be engaging and fulfilling in a way that I wasn't expecting. So maybe I'd be doing that instead of cyber. Yeah.
What profession would you not like to do?
I don't know. I don't think I would have been a good stonemason. So, talk about hard, unappreciated work, right? Anything in construction or that. So maybe that's something I wouldn't have gravitated or not like to do at this stage in the game.
And if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
This one, I thought about this one a lot. It's almost this weird validation of, hey, you gave more than you probably were capable of giving, right? Like that idea that not only did you engage, but man, you gave a lot more than what was expected or what was even possible. And man, that would be a great thing to hear at the end.
Well, I'm just wrapping up with Ron Fabela, industrial security champion for sure, and field CTO at Xona, and longtime multi-decade contributor to our space. Veteran, thank you for your service to our country, and thank you for the service in general that you're still doing in the cybersecurity capacity. We all benefit from that. In our modern connected society, we need more of you, not less. So thank you for all of that.
And likewise, thank you so much, and I really appreciate the time.
Take care. Be well, Ron.
You too.